Welcome to the Lagoon of Mystery, my home tiki bar here in Central Texas. Today, I am going to talk to you about other people who have things to talk to you about. When I first got into tiki and cocktails and mixed drinks and rum, I was a neophyte. I did not know very much about any of it, and the way I educated myself, apart from reading various books, was to listen to podcasts on a wide array of subject matter, and that's what I'm going to share with you now. A lot of these podcasts are still going strong, and they contain a lot of very valuable information that everyone can benefit with. So whether you are new to tiki, the home bar scene, or have been around for a while, I'm sure there's some podcasts on this list that you haven't heard of, haven't listened to, and would be able to get some entertainment and information out of. First of all, I'm going to start off with tiki, podcasts that are devoted specifically to tiki. And the first one on this list is Marooned, a Texas Tiki podcast put together by my friend David. I met him through Tiki Central, which hopefully will be back sooner rather than later. It's a really cool website, which is an entirely different subject matter. But David started up the Texas Tiki podcast basically to fill a void. There was nothing chronicling the events or the developments or the tikification of Texas. And Texas doesn't have as strong a tiki history as California or Florida, but it still has some interesting tiki developments going on. And one of the things he did was interview me early on when I was working on the Lagoon of Mystery, way before this section was even completed. And so you can go back to listen to his episodes and hear me discuss early on in my build out of the Lagoon of Mystery, kind of my philosophy and approach. But David does everything. He's interviewed Bamboo Ben, he's talked to different bartenders, different bar owners, anything to do with tiki in Texas, David has covered. So I really highly recommend it. They're always entertaining and interesting. The next one is probably the most popular tiki podcast in the world. It's Inside the Desert Oasis Room, which is produced by Adrian, who lives right outside of Los Angeles, and so gets to visit all of the tiki meccas there, from Tiki Tea to places in San Diego to Phoenix, Arizona. He's made some road trips up to San Francisco. He is one of the original tiki files for the tiki rebirth. As such, he knows everyone. Adrian, if there is someone who has been deeply involved with the new wave of tiki starting in 2000 or so, Adrian knows them. It's the astounding number of interviews and people and musicians and distillers and brewers and everyone that he's put together to interview with is just astonishing. So much of what I learned about the wider tiki culture came from listening to Inside the Desert Oasis Room. And Adrian's a really cool person. He's very active online. So if you want, you can subscribe and listen to the hundreds of episodes that he has already archived. And, he's just happy to chat with you. He's also recently started up a YouTube channel as well that he posts supplemental material to. So that's worth checking out as well. And I'll have all these links down in the comments section. Next up is a podcast that isn't tiki at all, although occasionally they delve into some mid-century modern furniture and design. It's It's a woodworking podcast, Wood Talk. They have a website, Wood Talk Online. It's run by three guys, Mark, Shannon, and Matt. The lineup has changed multiple times over the years. It's been running for about 10 years, a decade. It's three guys, three woodworkers who discuss different techniques and approaches to, home woodworking. What's interesting is that they take a lot of comments, a lot of questions from their listeners and address different problems and this sort of thing. If you've ever watched anything like New Yankee Workshop or any of those PBS TV series that ran through the 80s and 90s about woodworking, This Old House, those kind of things, it's sort of like that, only not, because these guys are cut-ups. I won't go so far as to say they're the click and clack of woodworking, but they just cut up. They bust each other's chops. One-liners, really bad dad jokes. They're hilarious. They are educational and informative, yes, but I listen to them just because they're funny as hell. And they just go back and forth and talk about all sorts of techniques and processes and issues within woodworking. I've learned so much about wood itself through Shannon's lumber updates that I'm not by any means a good woodworker or even competent, I would say, but a lot of what I've learned there I've put to use in building the Lagoon of Mystery, and I would say that my competency level has inched up by a few degrees simply by listening to them. So highly recommended. Now, we're starting to get into some really good stuff here. I didn't really know anything about rum when I first got into Tiki. I knew I liked it. Rum has long been my favorite spirit, but, like most everyone else in the world, I was ignorant. A lot of what I learned early on about rum, I learned through listening to the 5 Minutes of Rum podcast, which is a labor of love put together by Kevin Upthegrove. What Kevin would do is each episode take one bottle of rum, taste it, give his tasting notes, his impressions, what he thought about it, where he got it, price points, that sort of thing, and he would mix a cocktail with it and say how this particular rum featured in that cocktail and what it brought. It was very entertaining, it was very eye-opening, and taught me a new way to look about rum because, initially I didn't really know much about rum at all, and this opened my horizons and exposed me to a lot more rums than I would have found on my own. So this past year, because of coronavirus and other issues, Kevin has slowed down dramatically in his production of new episodes. But even so, even though there's not new episodes coming out, it's worth going back to the beginning and listening to the whole run because, one, he has some really good cocktails, and two, he talks about some really good rums. So, win-win right there. The other one that I would recommend for learning about rum is a newer podcast. It's been on the air or on the interweb for a little more than a year. It's called the Rumcast. A couple of guys, John and Will, put it out. I believe one is in Washington and the other's in Florida. And they talk about all things rum, and they focus on the rum industry, and they focus on different distillers and different issues within rum and rum culture and the rum industry. They have interviews with distillers. They had the Bartender CEO show up and talk with them recently, and they've talked with Ed Hamilton. Ed Hamilton threatened to strangle them during their interview. I mean, how much better can you get than that? I mean, I'd pay $1 to see that. It's just two guys with a passion for rum who are really aficionados of rum, and their enthusiasm comes through in every episode. So if you want to keep up to date with the developments in rum culture and the rum industry and the rum landscape in the United States and even other parts of the world, then by all means subscribe to the Rumcast. I highly recommend it. Now, being a neophyte and ignorant of rum back when I got into Tiki, it should come as no surprise to you that I was also ignorant about cocktails. Cocktail culture is something that had long fascinated me. Back when I was in college, ages ago, I really wanted to take a bartending class that they had in an extension learning. I never did. That's maybe a good thing, because from what I've learned, most bartending classes aren't really very good as far as professionalism goes. But to tell you how primitive my bartending skills were, I thought I was really hot snot when I would put a squeeze of lime into my rum and coke. So, I mean, that's as far as it went. I learned a lot about bartending and techniques and styles and trends in the industry by listening to these podcasts on cocktails and bartenders. First of all was Bartender at Large. Bartender at Large started off as a promotional vehicle for a documentary subsequently titled Bartender at Large, by Eric Castro, who is a bartender, has been on the West Coast and the East Coast, and now is the part owner of several bars scattered around the country. He talks with, as he says, the biggest names in the industry. He's had several hundred episodes, talked with distillers and bartenders and people who operate bartending competitions and just beverage directors. It's very fascinating. Each time they discuss different topics of interest in the industry. And just listening to that, I've been able to improve my bartending skills. It's kind of an inside baseball a little bit, but there's stuff here that appeals and applies to home bartenders as well. And Eric's a really affable guy. He's kind of goofy, and in the spare time, he reconditions Game Boys, old Nintendo Game Boys. He takes them out, puts LED screens in them, upgrades their sound and audio and everything, and they're like high-tech modern devices, which doesn't have anything at all to do with bartending, but I think it's really cool. So you should check him out on Instagram. The next podcast that I listen to a lot is the Speakeasy, and its lineup has changed over the years. It's been running for a decade. Damon, who has the most spectacular baritone radio voice in history, founded it, and he's not on as much anymore, but you have Souther Teague and Greg Benson, who are on now. And the three of them have a lot of interaction, a lot of varied experiences within bartending world. And between them, they know pretty much everyone. And if they don't know everyone, they know people who know them. So they get a lot of different guests on their show, which is interview format. And so they bring new distillers, new liquors, new cocktails, new drinks. They're debuted on their show, and they talk about the processes that go into it. They just recently had one on the Coconut Cartel, which is a new coconut rum that's coming onto the market. It's supposed to be in Texas next month, I believe. It's fascinating because it's a Guatemalan rum. It's an aged Guatemalan rum. But to proof it, when rum is aged, it's at a high proof. Barrel strength, you may have heard the term. And when it is marketed for sale, it is proofed down. Water is added to the rum to bring it down to 40 proof, which is 80%, 80 proof, which is 40% alcohol. What they did with their Coconut Cartel rum is use coconut water, filtered coconut water, to proof it down so it has a very natural coconut taste. And I'm really enthusiastic about trying this because that sounds brilliant. I have issues with a lot of flavored rums because let's face it, a lot of them have sugar added and they're sweetened and have a chemical taste to them. So if this coconut, they use coconut water to proof it down and no other additives or preservatives or anything like that added to it, I'm really enthusiastic about trying that out. So that's one of the guests that they've recently had, and it goes on from there. They talk about, all types of spirits. Modern Bar Cards, more recent discovery of mine. Eric Kozlik is the host on that, and they have interviews there as well on Modern Bar Cart, but he also does foundational episodes. A while back, he had an episode devoted to the Hurricane cocktail, which many Tiki files know as a popular Tiki adjacent cocktail. And he was discussing the history of the Hurricane, but did not mention that the original recipe called for fashionola instead of passion fruit syrup. So I emailed him, and within a month they had an episode devoted to fashionola and the strange history of this Tiki ingredient that is fairly obscure and not very widely available these days, although there are some producers who are coming out with it now. So Modern Bar Cart is a lot of fun to watch, listen to, and I recommend it as well. Just get a different perspective on the industry. A more, not necessarily formal, but Life Behind Bars is a podcast that's been going for maybe 2 years now. It's produced by the Daily Beast, and it has Noah Rothbaum and Dave Wondrich, who are the hosts of it. And they banter back and forth, but they have guests as well. And both of these guys have been in the industry for 20, 30 years and seen all sorts of trends come and go. So they offer a lot of insight and history to it because they've experienced the history, and I enjoy that type of aspect, that approach, that vision very much. Finally, as far as the cocktails and bartending goes, it's a little more informal, a little more fun. It's Music and Booze with Mo. Mo Herms is part owner of the Mermaid, a tropical bar in Los Angeles area. But prior to that, she was a DJ and in the music industry. And so her approach is to get with either musicians or bartenders and talk about the intersection of their musical tastes, musical experience, history with bartending and cocktail making and distilling and spirits and everything else like that. It's an interesting approach. It's lighthearted, it's relaxed, it's a lot of fun. And, I hear a lot of things that aren't covered on these other podcasts. Plus, every summer she does her Summer of Tiki, Mo's Summer of Tiki, Mo's Tropical Summer, and she does a tour of various Tiki bars around the country. Oftentimes she is on the West Coast because that's where she's based, but she's done Latitude 29 with Beach Bum Berry and other places. Tales of the Cocktail is a place that all these bartenders and bar owners and cocktailians converge on every summer in New Orleans, except for this year because of COVID. And it's a good place for a lot of these podcasts to track down people and corner them for interviews, and it's a lot of fun. So Music and Booze with Mo, to have get a good intersection of music and booze, as the title says. Finally, and be patient, I have two left. I want to talk about Tiki music. Music is an audio, oral experience, and a podcast is the perfect way to experience that. When I first got into Tiki, again, knowing very little, I didn't know much about the music that was associated with Tiki. So, two podcasts helped bring me up to speed and educate me about the proper musical accompaniment for various Tiki cocktails and Tiki spaces to set the mood and set the ambiance. One is Exotic Tiki Island, hosted by Tiki Brian. This is an interesting exercise because Enchanted Tiki Island is almost a throwback to the radio serials that once dominated the airwaves. All the various people who appear on the show have personas, they're characters, they're acting out roles, they're scripted. Each one starts off with everyone on the mainland getting to Exotic Tiki Island by some increasingly preposterous exotic mode of transportation, then trekking along to different locations on the island where they listen to different types of music. And it's a lot of fun. It's goofy as heck. I'm not going to lie to you on that. It's silly, it's cornball, but they play some really interesting music, and a lot of it is obscure. A lot of it's never been released digitally, and it's just a whole lot of fun. So, Exotic Tiki Island. The final podcast is the Quiet Village podcast. It's hosted by Digitiki, otherwise known as Marty Lush. In addition to being a walking encyclopedia with knowledge of all things exotica, he played vibraphones for the first 3 Tikiyaki Orchestra albums. He's just a fantastic host who knows, in addition to exotica, tons of information about Hapahauli, Hawaiian music, bossa nova, calypso. His musical interests span and roam far and wide. He's had episodes devoted to spy music, episodes devoted to cinema scores. He's had interesting guests on. He's had episodes devoted to Ima Sumac. He is probably one of the world's foremost authorities on Gene Rains, who is an enigmatic character. Many people consider the forgotten third man of exotica. He's had Elika Lyman on there, the great nephew of Arthur Lyman, the great exotica performer. He's talked about Martin Denny. He's interviewed Ernie Menehune, who was a Hawaiian performer for many, many years in Las Vegas and retired to Tucson, Arizona, and continued his performances. It's just the wealth and knowledge and diversity of obscure and fascinating music that he has shared on his show was a tremendous education for myself. It gave me pointers, showed me how to build a tiki music library, gave me pointers, gave me directions, taught me how to hunt for different things, what types of albums to look for, what was on CD, what was only on vinyl, what was now available digitally. It's really, he helped shape my view and my approach to music in my tiki bar, and I will always be grateful. And he's also a really kind of cool guy. I've communicated with him off and on online, and he's always, quick with the response, really willing to engage in interesting conversation. So there you have it. That's my primer for interesting podcasts to contribute to your tiki bar build, your rum library build, your cocktail builds, and your music library builds. I mean, it is from top to bottom. These are the podcasts that helped shape me into the tiki lover that I am today, and still do, as many of them are producing new episodes on a weekly or monthly basis. So until next time in the Lagoon of Mystery, aloha.